Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio here on a Tuesday on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Ravi, Lulla, and back with me today is the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew Rogers.
That's a hard title to live up to.
What's going on, buddy?
Hey, I'm good. We'll see how long the voice lasts throughout the show. I had no voice yesterday. I was sitting in the airport terminal with my brother-in-law, and I looked at him and I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk tomorrow on the show. And as the night went on, it started to come back a little bit more, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to fight through it. One, because I knew you weren't going to be here tomorrow.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk about the weekend with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I knew I came back tomorrow, then like on Thursday, it's kind of like, it already happened.
Yeah,
like,
we're almost to the next weekend already.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I got to come back tomorrow and talk to Ravi about it. But no, it's good. It's good. I'm back, and I'm not happy to be back in this weather. It was 65 in Vegas. And we were golfing, man.
Hey,
we were golfing.
It's like 35 in Nebraska, and it feels like 65 because it's 60 degrees warmer than it was a week ago.
Sure it does. I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works for me.
You could go out to one of the fine facilities out here. We got some indoor stuff. You could,
And you know what? I practiced at a few indoor spots before I left. Now, I have not recovered from the jet lag just yet.
Okay.
I don't think my body ever adjusted in Vegas.
And
if it did adjust, it was like the very end of the trip. So it's a 2-hour time difference.
Yeah.
We get there and look, we're up super early every morning to begin with. And I thought, man, this is as much as Vegas is a trip to stay out late, go clubbing, this, that, and the other. I'm like, this is kind of a trip to get some sleep.
I want to sleep past 5 o'clock.
Right. This is going to be nice. Every single morning. And now, granted, 7 o'clock is 9 o'clock Central Time, but I was up at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Every morning.
Yep.
And, the guys that I'm on the trip with outside of my dad and, the ones that have kids, were all sleeping until 9:30.
Yeah.
And so I'm up with the old dogs, drinking coffee, feeling like, 26 is the new 40. And, I just never recovered. So last night I went to bed at 8 o'clock. And I got to tell you, man, if I didn't set 7 alarms this morning, I wouldn't be here.
Slept right on through all of them.
Dude, my body was not getting me up at all. I rolled out of bed at 6:16.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I rolled out of bed. Normally I'm up at 5.
Yeah. Outstanding. So what, I know that you did some sports gambling out there.
Oh gosh. It didn't treat me well.
Yeah. What'd you say? You went 1-8?
I think the 8 is generous.
It's like 1.
I didn't want to get
12,
smacked too hard.
1-12, maybe.
Could have been closer to that double digit mark.
No. So what was the one? What was the one you won?
It was a 4-team NFL playoff parlay.
Okay.
So I took the Packers spread,
Mm-hmm.
which that wasn't a sweat at all. Actually, there were some people in my group that took the 49ers money line at -500.
They were sweating.
And I'm like, have fun, guys.
Yeah.
I'm cruising right now. The next game, what was the night game on that slate? The Ravens?
So that was the night game.
The Ravens were first.
Was Texans-Ravens.
Yeah, so I had the Ravens. I wanted to put their team total in there because that's what B said.
Yeah.
Apparently in Vegas, you can't parlay team total with other things. And I believe
interesting.
I believe you can do that on mobile sports betting, but you can't mobile sports bet in Vegas unless you use the BetMGM, and BetMGM wouldn't let you do it. Now, I'm not sure if Warhorse lets you do it, but my guess is no. So I couldn't do the team total, parlayed with everything else. So I took the Ravens and I bought 2 points at 7.5 because that 9.5 just seemed too big. It was either going to be a blowout or it was going to be close. And if it was going to be close, it was going to be under that 9 mark.
Yeah.
So I tried to play it a little cautiously. Sure enough, it was a blowout. So that was easy. Then I took the Lions -4, so I bought 2 points there.
Okay.
Because every prediction I was seeing was 23-20, 24-27. And I'm like, I got to get as close to this 4-point number as I can then. And then the very last leg, I had the Bills money line on that bet. But because the Chiefs were underdogs, I just chose to hedge. So I had $20 on the parlay. It would have paid out like $160. I just threw $50 on the Chiefs. And I said, all right, guys, I'm not going to sweat this game. Because that was the most nerve-wracking of them all.
For sure.
Because the line was so close.
Yeah.
And so I sat back and just relaxed. Let me tell you something. So I cashed out that bet. I'm chilling. I had a buddy who's a huge Chiefs fan. Made like $1,000 on the Chiefs game.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, good for you. Again, I didn't have to sweat it. Like, I didn't lose 3 years of my life. Good for you. I had another, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, Ashley's brother, on the trip. And I can tell this story now because it ends in something good. He was down easily like $800 to $1,000.
Yeah.
Just on sports betting, on gambling, on everything. He threw his last 200 that he brought on the 49ers money line, which is who I said was sweating out.
Sure.
He threw it on the Lions money line and the Chiefs. So 200 to win like all his money back.
Basically, yeah.
And I'm like, man, I think you should hedge. Like in that Bills game, I said, I think you should hedge.
Yeah.
I'm like, you have money like in your account. Just patch it through, direct deposit, hedge your bet, go home with at least $500.
Yeah.
Like, cut your losses. He's like, no, I'm going to write it. I'm
write
like, I said, you're an animal. I said, you're absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
Well, it paid off.
I'll say
it paid off.
Salvaged it.
Yeah, that was the only bet I hit, though. And it was a hedge. That's the funniest part about it. The only parlay that I hit. I bet on first touchdown scores. I threw $50 on Trey Palmer to score first. Oh, man, that one pass he got on that second drive was electric.
Yep.
When he made that play and all he needed to beat was the safety. Now, even if he beat him, I think he still would have gotten tackled. I don't think he would have had a straight shot to the end zone. But when he caught that ball, man, I was on my feet. And then I had Dalton Kincaid to score the first touchdown in that Bills game. On that first drive, Kincaid went 2 for 25.
Yeah.
They get to the 10-yard line. He's out for the next 3 downs. They just yank him and put Dawson Knox in.
Yeah. Get out of here.
Unbelievable, Sean McDermott. I'm with Ravi. You should be fired.
Fire him. Hire Bill Belichick.
I think I have some audio from your brother-in-law.
Yeah. If he was speaking Japanese after that, it wouldn't shock me. Nothing would have shocked me on that trip. But all things were good. Yeah, I'll give you a brief summary. We got there, we watched a lot of sports, and we gambled. We went golfing, played okay, not great. The greens were really tough. Probably the hardest greens I've ever played. Watched more sports, gambled some more, watched sports the next day. Oh, so Sunday, we were over at the Mandalay Bay. And everyone knows the Mandalay Bay for wrong reasons than right reasons.
Yeah.
If you remember the shooting that took place like 4 or 5 years ago. But the Mandalay Bay is a really nice hotel. They have a great sports book, but they have like this like VIP area that they turned into VIP. And it's normally like a high stakes poker. So they set up like couches and chairs in there. And I sent one of our guys over and I said, hey, go ask that guy if anybody can sit in here. Because it said fan zone.
Yeah.
So he walked over. He's like, yeah, anybody can sit in here. So before anybody else knew, we were sitting on couches and chairs to watch the NFL games on Sunday when everyone else rented a table in the sportsbook. We're still in the sportsbook. We just can't see the big screens. They set up like 2 or 3 TVs for us to watch.
Yeah.
We were sitting there for free. I guarantee they spent $500 on a table.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was one of the coolest parts, too, because I was just sitting here on a couch in the casino just watching all the games.
You're good to go.
Yeah, it was great. And then the other where I made most of my money, Ravi, it wasn't playing blackjack.
Yeah.
It was not playing slots. They had this crane machine in the casino. like something that you would see.
Like the claw machine?
Yeah, the claw machine that you would see at like an arcade.
Yeah.
And how it worked was your denomination, the money, whatever you could choose, a $5 bet, you could choose a $100 bet, whatever it was. There was an electronic wheel on the back wall of the machine that said what you were playing for. So it wasn't like you picked up a value and that value said like $40 or it was like whatever it said on the back screen. I played that machine every day. The first day I made $170. Okay. And I knew about this machine because I played it once at the Ameristar in Omaha.
Okay.
But I found out through connections that Ameristar in Omaha removed it because too many people were winning on it. And so I'm like, well, if it's in Vegas, like there's no way this machine's any different than the one I was just playing, like say a year ago. Like I won $1,000 on the one in the Omaha.
Nice.
So I'm playing this machine. I won $170 on like the first half of the first day.
Okay.
I went back Friday night and me and three of my buddies sat at that machine for an hour and a half. We netted like $1,400 at this machine. I cashed out twice. I had $1,000 and a $500, and then we were like trying to like get more.
Yeah.
Trying to reach that jackpot. The next day I go back, made another $1,500 on the machine.
Jeez.
Now I spread it around because people were pooling money for it. So that's how I made most of my money back from sports betting. I kid you not, Sunday or Saturday night, I wanted to Sunday night because I came back yesterday. Sunday night, I wanted to do it one more time. I go over to this machine and the jankiest out of order sticker is over where you put your dollars in.
Are you kidding me?
No joke. They knew I was still there and a resident that they were not going to let me play anymore because I took home $3,000 on the weekend on that machine.
Yeah. They're not
I leave. It's off. My buddy was still there because the flight to St. Louis got delayed.
Yeah.
He was still at the Mandalay Bay. He goes, dude, you're not going to believe it. It's like they took the out of order sticker off. They saw you check out.
You're the claw machine shark. You're not.
I thought I was going to get kicked out eventually for playing that too much. Or like, you know how when you count cards in blackjack, the pit boss comes over and it's like, you can't play anymore.
You got to go.
Now, I'm not smart enough to count cards. But I was just waiting on somebody like hotel security to be like, you can't play this anymore. Like I'm counting cards at the claw machine.
You're the claw machine.
He's done it again.
Claw machine shark. That's outstanding. That's fun. I'm glad you had a good time.
Hey, thanks.
I'm glad you're back.
I am too.
So you ended up, I'm guessing, with the claw machine, you ended up money or at least even?
I ended up even because the very last night when I couldn't play the claw machine one more time, I had like $200 profit at this point.
Okay.
And it's because I was a degenerate with my winnings on sports betting.
Sure.
Just to be one. And so I went to, and I'll never do it again. I went to high stakes slots or high limit slots. And I'm like, let's do like $25 spins.
Yeah, why not?
Let's just see what happens.
Let's do it.
I did like 8 spins and I was out of there. Yeah, it didn't go well. But I thought, you know what? I'm never going to get this opportunity again.
No.
I'm never going to play high limit slots ever in my life.
Yeah.
But because I had the profit, I said I'm either going home with everything that I came with, or I'm going home with a lot more than $200. And I went home with everything I came with.
Well, hey, you could definitely end up a lot worse after a weekend in Vegas. But glad you're back here. Moving on to some of there wasn't a ton going on in sports last night, at least with the college basketball and stuff like that. But leave it to Joel Embiid to have a night anyway for the Sixers. So I know a lot of our listeners are not huge NBA fans, and that's fine. But
scoring 70 points in a game is not easy to do.
Yeah, that's news, whether you're an NBA fan or not. To put in context here, how rare would you guess a 70-point game is?
I would guess only 3 people have done it.
It's more than 3. So it's about as common as a perfect game in baseball.
Oh, so like 20 people have done it?
Well, so I was doing some math here. There's been 14 total 70-point games in NBA history.
Okay.
And 8 different people have done it. Wilt is the only person to do it more than once. But if you think about, okay, there's about twice as many baseball games in a season as there are basketball games, and baseball's existed for about 50-ish years longer than basketball.
But if you think about it too, starting pitchers only pitch.
Yeah, like once every 5 days. Yeah.
So what's that, like 30 games in a season?
Yeah, you're right. So maybe it's about half as common as a perfect game. But yeah, so 8 different players, including Embiid, have done it in NBA history. Again, only 14 times in the 75-year existence of the NBA have done it. It is one of the more rare feats outside of obviously scoring more than 70, like Kobe is the only person besides Wilt to score 80. There is no one between 80.
Maybe that's the number I was thinking of.
Yeah, so it's literally 80 is Kobe and Wilt, and that's it. That's the list. And between the 81 for Kobe and the 100 for Wilt, there's nothing in between there for anyone. But 70 is, it's an incredibly rare achievement. Obviously, they won the game as well. It's kind of funny because on the same night, Karl Anthony Towns scores 62 and nobody cares because they lost. And his coach even kind of like brushed off. It was weird. There's weird stuff going on there in Minnesota. But yeah, Joel Embiid is the first player in NBA history to have a 70-point, 15-rebound, 5-assist game. He is the only person even close to that neighborhood is Jordan, who did 69, 18, and 6.
I was going to say, it's shocking that Jordan did not reach 70 once.
Never reached 70 points in his career. For as prolific as a scorer as he was, 69 was his career high. Never reached 70. And you've got some randos in the 70 club, like Donovan Mitchell has 71.
That's wild.
Devin Booker has 70, which
I remember Mitchell's game though.
Some of these, like the Devin Booker one in particular, these teams kind of start feeding they start playing just to get them the points a little bit.
Yeah, they shoot 42 to 50 times in the game.
And like Booker's, you could like the entire fourth quarter, they were basically trying to get him buckets. So you kind of have, I'll give Embiid credit. He shot 41 times, but he was 24 for 41. Like he was cooking.
When you shoot over 50% by yourself.
Yeah, he was cooking. So I'll give him credit there. And it was like a reasonably close game for a lot of that time, and so it wasn't crazy that he was in for as long as he was. It only ended up being a 10-point game, right? So, but no, it's a weird club. You've got like a Devin Booker in there. You've got a Donovan Mitchell. David Robinson is in there. Mm-hmm. That was a weird one. I think back in like 94, he was trying to win the scoring title and he needed 70 to win the scoring title. So his team kind of fed him there. You've got a David Thompson 70-pointer in there. There's some, and then you have like 6 Wilt games.
Yeah. At the very top.
Yeah. Which they're kind of outliers in and of themselves as well, because he was 7'3" and a freak, and he's playing against a bunch of like 6'6" guys. Mm-hmm. But which is fine, whatever. I'm not hating on Wilt Chamberlain, but it's a weird list. Like I think Elgin Baylor's in there.
He's on there.
It's a weird list. You don't have your Michael Jordans. You don't have, obviously you've got the Kobe game, but it's a crazy number for Joel Embiid to get to, and he's sort of a weird. Like, obviously he scores a lot, but I don't know that you ever look at him and be like, oh yeah, that guy could drop 70.
Yeah, now hardly.
He's a weird guy to do it.
Well, first off, is he healthy enough ever to score 70 points in a game? But 2, what were the Spurs doing? They were not playing defense at all. You knew, what was he doing how was he scoring his points?
Well, the Spurs are bad.
Yeah, but Wembanyama can defend much better than I saw.
Yes,
much better.
He can. Part of the problem, I think, for Wembanyama is
Dude, he can touch the ceiling. How are you not in Embiid's face when he's pulling up from the free throw line? The lackadaisical play that I saw from Wembanyama. And yes, Embiid has to make the shot regardless. And maybe he has to throw a little extra arc on it, but he's about as tall as Wembanyama. I doubt it. Wembanyama, if you are up in his grill, he's not taking those shots.
Yeah.
They were just letting him, giving him the mid-range jumper.
Yeah, it was kind of a strange game because you probably at a certain point you have to get out on him and defend it, right? But at a certain point you're probably like, okay, like early in the game, you're like, okay, he's not posting up on me, I can live with that. He's not shooting a three, I can live with that. It's like, yeah, if you want to shoot mid-range jumpers all day, go for it. Like that's usually the shot you want him to take, right? But when they're starting off on fire, I was like, you probably need to adjust your game plan a little bit there.
Maybe close out a little bit harder.
Like you gotta decide, hey, maybe we don't just let him shoot open jumpers all day.
And it was all day. It was all game from start to finish. Embiid was pulling up from the stripe all game long.
Yeah, he certainly was. And it was kind of cool. It's kind of cool to watch those just because when something sort of historic is happening, you see a guy start to roll. It's a really unique kind of experience in basketball that it's hard to replicate in other sports where a guy is just really getting like on one. Whether it's like I've went back and I've watched Kobe's 81. I've seen, you've seen Curry go off. You've seen like Klay Thompson go for 37 and a quarter. You see, I saw the Donovan Mitchell and the Lillard games and those ones, and you kind of look at it and you like, there's a very unique experience in watching a basketball player just find this groove. And it's really kind of unlike anything else in sports. Yeah. To stay in it for a whole game. Like that's like, you see a guy goes for like spurts, right? You see a guy go for like 3-4 minutes. You're like, oh man, he's cooking. He takes a heat check.
Or like, in the fourth quarter, he plays the entire thing and scores 28 points.
Yeah. Right. Like, you've seen that with like LeBron's done that and stuff like that. But to see a guy get hot early and stay hot through the entire game, it is really kind of a cool experience. And so, I mean, as somebody who just loves basketball, that's kind of my takeaway from it. Is it's just really enjoyable to see a guy operate at that high of a level. But I mean, the Spurs are bad. Like
they're very bad.
It's kind of like when hit the worst team in baseball. You're like, well, I mean, it's still a no-hitter. It still counts.
They're still Major League Baseball players.
They are still Major League Baseball players. But it's like you're not.
These guys are still NBA players.
You're not no-hitting the 27 Yankees here. Coming up next, we'll set up the show for you. We've got some other college basketball news in the Big East, as well as a former Husker apparently has found a home, we think this time. More on Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Apparently the play-by-play guy for Philadelphia doesn't consider Wilt Chamberlain a center. That's fine. Maybe he was talking about more modern.
Tall enough.
Yeah, just a slight 7'2". That's Andrew Rogers. He's back. I'm Ravi Lulla. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and of course Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can join us anytime, or you can give us a call on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline at 888-638-4876. Setting up the show real quick. We will talk to Mike Schaefer, not at his normal time, but at 7:45 this morning. We will talk to Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7 at 8 o'clock. Special treat for you. Shout out to Shano for landing this one. Joe Lunardi, bracketologist from ESPN, kind of the godfather of bracketology. He will join us at 8 a.m. We can find out how things are starting to shape up. We're 5 weeks away from March. We're right there. We are right on the doorstep.
It's crazy.
Which it is crazy, but I'm also excited. I'm incredibly excited that we are not only just hopefully rounding the corner and getting out of winter, knock on wood, but at least we'll be, even if we're not, we'll have some high level college basketball heading our way in the form of the conference tournaments and March Madness sooner rather than later. Then at 9, we will talk I wanted to talk Ohio State football because they've had a very interesting week. They hire Bill O'Brien as their offensive coordinator.
I thought, whoa.
They get Julian Sayin as an additional quarterback in a very crowded room. I mean, you've got 2 5-stars, Will Howard, and the 2 guys that were already there. That's a really interesting situation to see play out. So we're going to talk to Doug Lesmerises. He has this show called Kings of the North. It focuses on Northern college football. They've got all the SEC podcasts and shows and whatever. He's like, hey, Big Ten Northern football deserves some love too. So Doug Lesmerises, he has this show called Kings of the North. We're going to talk some Ohio State football with him because I'm really interested to see how this plays out with the quarterback situation. That's not something that we've seen be able to be pulled off often in this new era of college football, and want to see what the take is on Bill O'Brien as the new offensive coordinator in Columbus. And then, of course, we'll wrap up the show with some Hurrdat Hot Seat at 9:30. But before we get into any of that, little Nebraska football stuff I wanted to get into here. First and foremost, former Husker quarterback Chubba Purdy, who had committed to San Jose State
and then lost their coach.
And their head coach immediately left. Unrelated.
Yes, not because Chubba ended up
there. Not because of Chubba.
That did sound bad, though.
It did. Yeah, I was like, wait, that's
he showed up, the other guy left.
No, it was the timing was unfortunate for Chubba. Brent Brennan got the job at Arizona. We talked to Adam McClintock. I thought it was an underwhelming hire. He thought it was an underwhelming hire. And apparently Chubba Purdy thought it was underwhelming, the situation he was left in San Jose State. So he's committed to Nevada now. So hopefully he finds a landing spot there.
Wolfpack.
Yeah, honestly wish Chubba nothing but the best. It's kind of weird because I know it didn't go super well with Chubba. I know that he didn't win any games. I did feel sort of the best about him of the 3 guys. Like, if I could have picked a quarterback to stay, I probably would have picked Chubba. I'm certainly glad that they have a guy with some experience in Harburg still there, considering the other 2 main guys are true freshmen. But kind of just watching them play, I was like, yeah, Chubba's kind of the guy that I had the most confidence in, which is, it's a pretty low bar, to be fair, for Nebraska quarterback play last year.
Right.
So I wish him the best. I hope he gets an opportunity to play and that, he's healthy because, he was pretty banged up last year at times. I hope he's healthy and, maybe has a nice little career at Nevada.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd argue that. Because I think him and Harburg are pretty hand in hand.
It looks a lot different.
If you put them on the scale,
yeah,
they're probably closer to 50-50. So it's just whichever one state. Like I'm cool with either option as for at least the Nebraska quarterback room moving forward. The offense that was ran fit Harburg more than Chubba, which is wide to the eye. Like if you were just doing the eye test, Harburg would be easier to say, I would rather have him versus Chubba. But if the offenses were flipped and it was more pocket passing than it was quarterback run game option play, then it would be easier to the eye to say, oh, Chubba's the guy. So without anybody just jumping right at, because at first I was like, what are you talking about, man? But then as I sat and thought about it as you were kind of finishing up your thought, I'm like, well, I mean, we didn't see enough of Chubba to really
we didn't see very
like,
much of him.
Hey, he was better than Harburg, but you can't also rest with just Harburg was better because you saw him win games. Like that's not true.
The
either.
schedule was way different. His opportunities
he
were
played
different.
A lot of non-con games. He played a lot of the lower-ended Big Ten West football games. And when Chubba made his appearance, it was against
Wisconsin, Iowa.
Right.
Yeah, it was against the
2 big dogs in the West.
Yeah, and honestly, I think part of the reason I would have preferred to keep Chubba was because of the offense I think they're going to run this year versus what we saw from the offense last year, right? I think his skill set probably fits better into what the future offense will look like with Glenn Thomas and Dylan Raiola, obviously. And we've talked about this guy a little bit, speaking of what the offense is going to look like. I have decent reason to believe Dana Holgorsen will end up on Nebraska staff. Without being too vague and ambiguous, I think he ends up as an analyst on Nebraska staff. I don't think the way the staff is set up, I don't think there's a on-field position for him, because Glenn Thomas did end up getting the co-OC role with Marcus Satterfield. So you've got your co-offensive coordinators, you've got running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, and quarterbacks covered. I don't know where he would fit in on the offensive side of the ball unless you gave him a weird, like, associate head coach pass game coordinator title. I don't, you'd have to make something up, and then you'd have to move somebody else to either analyst role or let him go. I don't really see that happening at this point. So I think he is coming to Nebraska. I would guess maybe another week or 10 days before we find that out. It sounds like there's a February 1st date that's involved with his Houston buyout. That kind of makes things a little bit simpler if he waits till after that. But I would expect him to be an analyst on Nebraska staff, more so than I did before when we knew they were just talking. And so again, that kind of leads me to believe I'd probably rather have Chubba Purdy if we're judging by the offenses we've seen from people
what the coaching staff looks like,
what the coaching staff
could look like.
Yeah. But wish Chubba Purdy the best. And honestly, maybe with the improvements Heinrich Haarberg made from the last coaching staff to this year, maybe he takes another leap and is even better and more polished and more capable than we're expecting him to be.
Yeah, let's not forget Haarberg's a tough guy.
Yeah.
He's somebody that just puts his head down every day and goes to work. And so when you have somebody with that sort of toughness, that's just, if he's not a starter, a great role player for your team, a great role model for your team, somebody to strive to be like. And if you have that sort of personality, he's easy to get along with. He's easy to want to emulate, and he's just easy to be a great teammate. Heinrich Haarberg showed a lot of promise last season in a season of, well, let's just call it a season of terror because of
on the offensive side of the ball, for sure.
That sort of came down with the 5-7 record. But if you see the light at the end of the tunnel there, Ravi, there was improvement to be seen. And a lot of that was because of the play from Heinrich Haarberg. He got some of those young wide receivers a lot of reps last season. He was still getting them the football. It may not have looked perfect every time, but he was getting them the football. He was making plays to Jalen Lloyd every game at least once.
once
70 yards. But there's promise there. And if anything, it's great to have experience at that position.
Coming up next, we've got a guy with a lot of experience in the recruiting game, our guy Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Now we're talking to Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7 on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Schaefer, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'd rather talk to Brian Christopherson too, for what it's worth.
Listen, we love talking to you, Schaefer. Come on now.
I get it.
He is a nice guy.
I would rather be hearing from him as well.
I mean, don't forget about Brunsey. We love Brunsey too. You can't leave out the other guy in the crew.
That's all right. I mean,
just the Three Stooges.
Well, it pretty much goes Brian, then me, then Brunsey. Everybody does. You can let him know.
You just put him on the bottom of the food chain? Just call him out like that?
I mean, I feel like it's a well-known fact.
We're gonna have to discuss this with Bruns on Thursday. We're gonna have to.
I can't wait to get there.
Let's
patch him in now, Shane.
I didn't. We did talk last week about ranking your coworkers. I didn't know that Schaefer was going to do it unprompted. Just what are these ratings based on, Schaefer? How are we ranking them?
BC's a 5-star. Schaef's an obvious 4-star in this scenario.
Long-term potential, fit within the program, coachability.
Is Bruns not coachable? Is that the problem?
I could see that.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, and then Lunardi was born here in Nebraska. Bruns was born out in California. You got to worry about the transfer portal. Opportunity to cover Stanford 247, he might just jump on it. He might just lose him.
I don't know that there's a lot of traffic on the Stanford 247 site, Schaefer. That might be taking a little step down in career path. That's okay though.
Yeah, believe it or not, it went down after Andrew Luck went to the Colts.
And they've never recovered.
That makes sense. Yeah. When they're recruiting 5-star students though. We know that. Schaefer, there was a big visit weekend for Nebraska. A lot of 2025, 2026 guys that were in town over the last few days or week or so. What have we learned, if anything, about some of those guys as Nebraska starts focusing more and more on next year's class?
Yeah, I mean, we have definitely heard good things about the visit weekend, as you often do. And then the really interesting thing, they just had a lot of talent that they were able to get to campus, on a weekend where the weather wasn't fantastic. But talked to like Cortez Mills last night, top 247 wide receiver from Florida, and he's like, you get there and it's going to be cold and you're cold, and then at some point you just realize you're still there and it's fine. And I was like, well, that's a pretty apt description of just living in cold weather. You're cold, you realize you're still there and it's fine. So I think the visit weekend went really well. There's no imminent commitments coming out of it, but a lot of this is kind of just kicking the door open for 2025, getting some of these guys like a Mills, who was so jacked about how his visit went. He's planning on being back this spring. That's a guy I would keep an eye on. I mean, there's a ton of connections to him specifically. And, oh, by the way, he's going to go visit Georgia, Clemson, and LSU now. So it's not like there won't be competition. But, I mean, Nebraska's done a really nice job with getting things going. With some of these guys, I think it was important to them, let's get them in January, so that way when they come back in June, or if they come back for the spring game, it's not their first time here, that they've already got a baseline, and then we can build off of that. And so a lot of this weekend was laying kind of the foundation for what they want to do for this 2025 class, building some early relationships, sowing some seeds in the minds of some guys of like, hey, if I come here, this guy might also be coming here, or these guys are already here and they're from my area, in the case of Cortez Mills. So I think they've just kind of built off of what they already have, start laying some of the foundation for some of these, top end guys that they want coming back. And then, they introduced something new this weekend that has really caught recruits by surprise. They call it interactive meetings. And what they did is they had guys line up at their positions in groups of 11 and then just go through like play calls and go through checks. And they would talk them through what it would be like in this situation if they were playing at Nebraska. And recruits have just been raving about that. And I've never heard of a Nebraska visit doing anything quite like it. And so I think, the fact that they're always trying different things, they're always doing different things, has really sort of helped out. And that word of mouth, I think, is certainly going to spread as well. I mean, they've got another visit weekend coming up here Saturday. They're going to have more visits in March and April. But I just think, even though there wasn't a commitment that came directly out of it, they're pretty happy with how everything went.
Schaefer, reflecting more on the weekend and what's to come, would you call this the Matt Rule effect, the Dylan Raiola effect, or the Nebraska program effect?
I mean, it's got to be all three, right? Like, because it's as much as everyone's excited about Dylan Raiola, some of these relationships predate the fact that he was even, a possibility for Nebraska. And so there's some of that. And as excited as people are about Matt Rule, I mean, not everybody necessarily is looking at Nebraska because of Matt Rule. It might be because they grew up in Kansas or Missouri and Nebraska was a big deal to their parents or what have you. But the cumulative effect of these three things is arrow way up for Nebraska recruiting. I mean, you've got a coach that seemingly everyone raves about when they walk away from their first visit, just, in the way that he talks and the way that he, I really hate using this word because I think there's connotations that I don't want with it, but the way that he preaches, in a way. I mean, he preaches about family, he preaches about football, he preaches about life, and those messages connect really well. You've got an excitement factor in Dylan Raiola that this program has not had in a long time. And then you have its history. And by the way, this is going to be really tough for you guys to believe, and somehow I never mentioned this. Nebraska has brand spanking new facilities, and they're pretty good. The recruits tell me. So they're like, oh man, I can't wait. If I come here, like they're going to be completely finished. These are the nicest in the country. Yada yada yada. They certainly notice the bells and whistles. We'll put it that way.
We're talking with Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, looking at that 2025 class, already, of course, they have a handful of commitments already. With especially you've got the 3 Nebraska kids, and then CJ Simon, the most recent one back in December. I guess as you're sort of, I know it's way, way early, so I'm going to give you permission to speculate here a little bit. But as you're looking at the tea leaves and some of the guys they're involved in early and things like that, like where do you think ceiling wise, like best case scenario, Nebraska's class could end up? You know, obviously I think their high school class was 18 this year. A lot of that was boosted by a guy like Dylan Raiola coming into the class. But assuming you don't have another Dylan Raiola like surprise out there, like what kind of ceiling is Nebraska looking at for like a 2025 class?
I mean, I always feel like the ceiling for Nebraska in recruiting is falling somewhere between like 13 and 17. And the difference between 13th and 17th is really minuscule.
Mm-hmm.
It's, maybe one different recruit. Now, the problem is that I don't know that Nebraska is going to take a massive class size.
Okay.
And so class size can really dictate your overall ranking. Nebraska is going to be a top 25 class without Dylan Raiola, but it was going to do it on the strength of signing 28 players. I mean, so it's kind of a double-edged thing. If they only take 18 players, but they're really good, and their average recruiting ranking would have them as 13th in the country, their overall number might be lower cumulative total because they have 18 players relative to Colorado taking 30, or
sure.
For example. So I definitely think they can be in the mid-teens. I really struggle with the idea that there'll be a top 10 recruiting program without ever winning anything meaningful. But right now, with sort of the cachet that they have and the excitement factor of Dylan Raiola and the sort of, high-level offensive players that they need a lot of in this class that have a lot of interest right now, I mean, there's a chance they could stack multiple 4-star wide receivers and a running back, maybe 2 running backs, and then you add in with your Christian Jones and everything else that you hope to additionally add elsewhere, and you could have 5-6 guys in the top 247 plus a few other 4-stars. You could paint a really nice picture, and that's all to say I still think probably mid-teens is the high point. But I would caution people, it's just going to be really hard for Nebraska to continue to take these massive classes year in and year out. At some point, they're going to have sort of a smaller class, but that doesn't mean it's going to be any lesser in terms of stars. It just means that the overall number is just not going to be what we've seen, which it can't be. I mean, they took 30-some the year before and 28, 29 here this past year, plus they got a guy on campus right now in Fiona Wilhite. So they're never slowing down at any point. And so it's hard to expect that they will, but it's also hard to expect that they can keep that pace too.
Mike J. Schaefer from the Husker 24/7. Schaefer, we appreciate you making time for us this morning. I know you're busy, but we appreciate your time, and hopefully we can catch up to you with a little bit longer next week.
All right, thanks for being flexible, guys, and let me know how Brunch feels about my power range.
We will. We'll talk to him on Thursday. That's our guy, Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7.
And I don't think BC will have a problem where he sits.
I was saying, listen, he got ranked number 1. He's going to love it. We're going to see where Joe Lunardi has a bunch of college basketball teams ranked in his bracketology. The OG bracketologist, Joe Lunardi from ESPN, joining us next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, and ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with you as well. We are very pleased to be joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by Joe Lunardi, ESPN bracketologist. Joe, how are you this morning?
I'm fine, fellas. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Terrific to have you on as well. Joe, been following your work on bracketology for a very long time, so really excited to talk to you. I'm curious, kind of at this point in the season where the resumes are starting to take pretty good shape, but there's still a lot of work to be done before even the regular season ends. What's the challenge at this point in the year of trying to project what the bracket's going to look like?
Sometimes it's as simple as staying awake late at night for late games. You said, Ravi, you've been following a long time, and whenever I hear something like that, the word old comes to mind.
Way to go, Ravi. Now he's never going to come back.
Well, I mean, I have a wife to neglect, and she reminds me regularly, that I've been doing this a long time, and sometimes she'll just use the word straight out, old, and, other synonyms. No, I mean, look, we're talking about a dynamic process, a very fluid process, in the quote unquote old days when, you'd put up one bracket a week on ESPN.com, fold your hands and come back and look at it again next Sunday as a snapshot. It was a different way of going about things than is the case today. Now from the first night of the season until the last, I have a 1 to 68 updated seed list based on that day's results. And it kind of requires paying attention, not to every team in the country, but to the top 100 or 120 or so that we're tracking at any one point, because now we're into conference play. So in a quote unquote one bid leagues, those first place teams can change on a day-to-day basis. So, it's far from undoable. Like, obviously it's doable. I do it. A lot of people do it, and a lot of people are really good at it. The biggest challenge for me has always been just making sure to stay current, because, I've learned the hard way. Once you fall a day or two behind, it's really hard to recreate. And that's when, frankly, you make mistakes, or at least make yourself prone to being off target. So that's a little inside baseball. And, that's what I do for a living for 4 months.
Joe, everybody loves upsets, including me. And, the stories that people remember are those teams that make upset runs, like St. Peter's or Dayton from years ago. If you're kind of looking at the bracket, if it started today, who would be some of those tournament sleepers that you think could make a run based on the way they're playing basketball right now?
I think at the end of the day, there's two kinds of sleepers. There's the St. Peter's out of the blue, out of nowhere sleeper. And then there's typically, like, I'll call it's primary day, right? On the East Coast, a down ballot team in a major conference, right? And for the sake of argument, and since I know what area code called me, I'm going to say Nebraska. Okay? All right. See, I've been doing this for a while, and let's be honest. No one can pick a St. Peter's in advance, right? Maybe a Loyola Chicago, that was 30-2 the year, they rode that great point guard play from Sister Jean all the way to the Final Four. Anybody who'd seen them knew they were really good basketball team. But like, we're going to have a team or two in the Final Four. Now, last year it happened to be Florida Atlantic and San Diego State that caught people off guard. I would put Florida Atlantic in kind of the Loyola Chicago category, because if you had seen them last year in Conference USA, now in the American, you'd say, hey, they're good. And they have great guards and they're experienced. So, sure, they could get on a run. Now, San Diego State, while not in a Power 5 conference, if you will, was in a 4-bid league. So they fall more into the Nebraska category, I think, of, a down ballot team that, maybe got hot at the right time. Now, can Nebraska be that team this year? Can Indiana State be that team in the St. Peter's category, or Grand Canyon? It's not out on a limb to talk about Princeton. I mean, they've only lost one game, and they were in the Sweet 16 last year as a 15, right? Beating, I want to say Missouri or Arizona and then Missouri, I think. So, somebody's going to win 2 games that first weekend that nobody's talking about. So I tend to look at teams, that are older, that maybe have great guards, have some experience in tight spots. And, my own kind of personal bias in these things is I look at teams that have posted some big wins away from home. Because unless they change the rules back, you're not playing any home games in the tournament. And you're going to ask me, what does Nebraska have to do? And I'm going to say they have to pick up a couple road games here and there in the league, because unless they do that, they're going to stay at 500. And, that means they're on the bubble.
We're talking with Joe Lunardi, ESPN bracketologist. Joe, well, one of the big narratives this year has kind of been how there's not really a dominant team, how there's, a lot of parity at the top of college basketball this year. You can make that argument, but I also think you can look at kind of the resumes of a UConn and Purdue and say, that though they seem to be pretty clearly a cut above maybe everyone else. As you kind of put together, I know you said you do your seed list 1 through 68 all the time. Like, as you are, where do you see a gap between those two, or do you think there is kind of that parity in the top 20 or so teams in the country that people have been talking about all year?
No, I think there is separation, especially in the case of Purdue. Now, the quote unquote eye test, if you will, which is, not something that I've ever subscribed to, because it's less and less of the committee's process every year, it seems, from my seat. I think basketball wise, Purdue and UConn are, I don't want to say a cut above, but, they're on a different rung of the ladder. Okay. And in terms of resumes, which is, how we determine seed order, if you will, it's a 1-team race. Like, Purdue's resume is historically great for this point of the season. Like, at this point, UConn in the 2 spot is further away from Purdue almost than it is from the beginning of the low 2s and high 3s.
Oh, wow.
Purdue's resume is extraordinary. Now, I'm guessing the folks who went to the game in Lincoln would have a different opinion. But, 7 quad 1 wins, over half of them in what we call quad 1A, which is the top half of quad 1. And that's something that's become an issue in recent years, to try and separate, the the best from the very best, if you will. And I mean, quad 1 and quad 2, they're 11-2. No one's close to that.
Yeah.
Their metrics are off the chart, and like they could leave the country for a week and still be the number 1 overall seed.
Joe,
and having been to West Lafayette, perhaps they already have.
Joe, we built our way too early Final Fours. When was that, Ravi? 2 months
November,
ago?
I think.
November?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, better that than July, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, between Ravi and I, it's never too early to pick a Final Four. But,
I know the feeling.
when we drew up our Final Fours, I threw Texas into mine because I really like how they finished last season. I loved what they kind of did in the transfer
They
portal.
added nicely.
Yeah,
sure.
They got Max Asmus. You talk about good guard play. They got Asmus.
Yeah.
What do you think of Texas right now? Because as I'm looking over the bracketology, I don't know, maybe I just skipped over them because I'm looking quickly, but I didn't
see him.
I didn't see Texas on there. And, I was in Vegas this past weekend, and they were 90-1 to win the national title. What do you think of Texas?
Well, I think it's important to note, like in bracketology, like in Caddyshack, there's no gambling at Bushwood. so I don't, I would never say that that's an excellent bet at 90-1. I would clear my throat real loudly. I mean, look, they've underperformed.
Right.
To this point, and I think in today's new bracket, they're all the way up to next 4 out, which means they're between 5 and 8 spots away from the at-large cut line. And their aspirations were certainly much, much greater than that, and still could be. The problem is in that league, I mean, once you're behind the curve, you're fighting a fight every week just to go 1-1.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to do better than that to move up. And I do think they'll ultimately make it and that talent will prevail. But I mean, they might be like 10-11 kind of team. And yeah, they could be the team that gets hot, but too inconsistent for my taste. And, sometimes the whole is not equal to the sum of the parts. And we tend to admire the opposite when teams, quote unquote, overachieve because they appear to be getting the most out of their talent. But, what's still to be learned in this portal era is, sometimes all-star teams aren't very good because they're not the right fit and they haven't grown and played together. I'm not there every day. I don't know. I don't see every minute of every Texas game. I can only go by the results, and the results tell me that, even if they make it, they're not likely to string multiple wins together in the tournament.
We're talking with Joe Lunardi of ESPN, the godfather of bracketology. I think I called you earlier. Joe, I'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about Creighton here. You've got them as a 4 seed in your bracketology that's currently up on ESPN. As you've seen them play this year, and as you kind of look at their schedule and what's left for them in terms of opportunities, what do you think the ceiling is for this Creighton team in terms of seed line?
I do see them a lot. I live outside of Philly, so I have, Villanova and the Big East on the brain a fair amount of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, even without that, let's be honest, the Big East is a pretty compelling story this year all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't already know, it was proven last week, they're not in UConn's class. They're in the next tier.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's more a statement about UConn than it is about Creighton. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if Creighton and Marquette played a best of 7 on a neutral court, it would go to the last possession of the 7th game.
Yeah.
I think.
I agree.
And they've been sliding right between the 4 and 5 lines here for the better part of January. I don't think they've been above that or below it. And, what would it take to get a winning streak, right? Because, like, a 4-game winning streak in that league is going to make them a 3 seed. And I think that's probably the ceiling because they're still going to take some losses. They only play UConn one more time, right? That's at home. Possible win, but they've got other road games that could flip against them. But I see, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because I know some of the people and I like them. I think their best basketball is still in front of them. And I don't think that the UConn game was really indicative of who they are. I think UConn had a great night defensively. And, let's face it, Creighton's built to outscore you. And if they're off offensively, they're going to lose by double digits because, this is not the 85 Bears defense out there we're talking about.
Joe, it's impossible for Creighton to ever play their first round game in Omaha, but it isn't impossible to think about Nebraska. How realistic do you think that Nebraska could be playing a first round game in Omaha? Like, do you think it's a stroke of luck or it's high probability?
It's almost entirely a stroke of luck at their seed range. If they were a top 3 seed, they would, kind of not control, but they'd have much more influence over their geographic destiny, if you will. And here's the other thing to remember: like Omaha, in all likelihood, is going to be the home in the tournament of the Big 12 winner and the Big 12 runner-up. So let's call that a 1 and a 2 seed. Okay? So we know by mere bracketing rules, in the same 14 grouping with the 1 is going to be an 8, 9, and a 16. Right? So they're not going to be a 16 if they're in. They could be in 8, 9. So that could happen. And then with a 2, it's the same deal, 2, 7, 10, 15. So they could be in that spot, but not if the 1 or a 2 is from the Big 10. Right? Like they can't be an 8 or a 9 with Purdue.
Right.
And, they can't be a 7 or a 10 with Illinois if Illinois is a 2 or some other big, or Wisconsin's a 2, let's say. So, it would be a stroke of luck. It happens, but it's like I wouldn't be booking a steak dinner downtown if I were a Nebraska fan.
I mean, you should book a steak dinner downtown
anyway,
just
regardless.
For fun. But
well, I'm just saying, like when I come to Omaha, and I do like Omaha, like you're not coming for the crab cakes.
I'll tell you what, though, Ravi's got the restaurant for you. We'll send it over your way.
Yeah, next time you're in town, Joe, hit us up. I got a place to send you. For my money, the best place in town. But Joe, so I got to ask you this. We got a few minutes left here with you. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine, and I'm sure you've got more insight to it than I do.
Not my fault. Not my fault.
No, it's not your fault. It's a bone I have to pick with the committee, but I would like your insight on it. So it seems like in the last handful of years, maybe a little bit longer than that, I grew up obviously a Creighton fan in Omaha, and so that was Missouri Valley. The mid-majors are near and dear to my heart. It seems like the committee has shifted away maybe from giving some mid-majors some extra opportunities, and as you mentioned, given some of those down ballot major conference teams more of those at-large bids. Was that a conscious decision on their part? Is it just kind of how the metrics changed and it favored those teams, or are they just out to get the little guy?
They're not out to get the little guy. I don't believe that.
I was a little tongue in cheek, but yeah.
No. But like I have to be fair, and I'm in a little guy, frame of reference also, in more ways than one. I am taller on TV maybe than in real life, but but I do think that, and this is going to have to be addressed as we move forward to conferences that are even bigger and bigger. Like, I don't think the world is a better place if at 6-12 in the Big 12, West Virginia makes the tournament.
Exactly.
Or
right. Yeah.
At 7-11, Oklahoma makes the tournament. Like, if there's been any intentional squeezing, like the team sheets completely ignore conferences, which they should, but they also completely ignore conference record, which to me is silly. Because it's 60% of your season. Right. I think how you can now they'll say we treat every team as an independent, blah blah blah, but like that's the same way as saying if we're voting for the Baseball Hall of Fame, we're going to evaluate the Good Glove shortstops the same way we evaluate the slugging left fielders. Right? They're different things. And we're looking for different achievements in each category. And all I know is, while each season is its own entity and each team needs to be evaluated that way, if you look over a period of 10 or 15 or 20 years and study it, and hypothetically, I might be the kind of nerd who's done this, I know that, you know, in that 10, 11, 12 seed range, which is where these bubble majors, middling majors, and the second Missouri Valley team, for instance, might fall, that over a period of years, the high-end mid-majors get half the bids than the middling majors, worse seeding on average, but win twice as often.
Oh, okay.
And there's a pretty simple reason for that. And it is they're better at basketball. And one of these days, we'll break through the noise and make that known. I think there should be a minimum, like bowl eligibility. I think there should be some standard of tournament eligibility. And it's already heading south because we're going to have sub 500 teams more and more in their league as leagues get bigger. So let's come up with something else. And it would also add a lot more juice to championship week, but that's the programmer in me, and that's for another time.
No doubt.
That is Joe Lunardi, ESPN bracketologist, preaching to the choir. Give mid-majors more bids.
Thanks, Joe.
Joe, thank you.
See you guys. Thanks.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi, Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me.
What up?
Just had Joe Lunardi on, ESPN bracketologist. Really good stuff there.
I love talking about March.
Oh, yeah, and I'm a huge bracketology nerd. I have been looking at that stuff since I was a kid. I failed to mention to Joe, you know, because I could already tell he felt like I was calling him old a little bit there, what age I was when I started looking at those bracketology, his bracketology predictions. I mean, it's probably been going on 20 years now that I've been looking at his stuff. So really cool to get to talk to him. You know, what else is really cool is tomorrow night. It's finally here. The Omaha Supernovas. First match ever in the Pro Volleyball Federation. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at CHI Health Center against the Atlanta Vibe. You can still get tickets, season and single game tickets at supernovas.com. World-class talent from both the Supernovas and the Atlanta Vibe. NCAA champions, All-Americans, Olympians, an incredible display of talent in professional volleyball. Join the volleyball movement sweeping across the country and see your Major League Volleyball team, the Omaha Supernovas. Again, that's supernovas.com for tickets and more information.
I'll take it.
Wanted to get to a couple things here. There was the lines have come out for the conference championship games this weekend. 49ers open up as 7-point favorites against the Lions. Ravens open up as 3.5-point favorites against the Chiefs. And I'll be honest, my initial reaction to that, I thought 7 was too big for the 49ers. That seemed too high for me. Like the Lions are good. That seems like a big number. 7
and I don't know if the 49ers offense is 7.5 points good.
Well, it depends on, honestly, a lot of it depends on the weather. We saw that.
I think it also depends on Debo's status.
Yeah, Debo's status matters a lot. He doesn't have a fracture in that shoulder, but he is questionable at best. Honestly, what it feels like to me is that they're trying to make it seem like he might play. I don't think he's playing. If they make the Super Bowl, I think he'll be available. It's I think pretty similar to the injury he had earlier in the year where he missed a couple games. To me, I wouldn't expect him to play. 7 seems like a big number. If it's not raining the way it was last week, Brock Purdy's going to have a better day. You could tell that he just was not gripping the football well for most of that game. So I'm not worried about Brock Purdy as much, but you're right. Not having Debo is a big deal. And I mean, the Lions are just good. Like, this is a good Lions team. I get it's a home game for the 49ers, but the fact that this is more than like 3.
Which is BS.
What?
Well, I mean, that Cowboys game, it should have been home field for the Lions. The Lions should have had the number 1 seed.
Well, no.
The Lions should have had that. That was a bunch of
even if it
now
would have gone the Lions' way, the 49ers still could have won week 18 and locked up the 1 seed.
Yeah, they had it locked up the week before.
How is there where I would be concerned at if I'm the Lions is the middle of the field, because they're bringing all those guys on the outside. They're bringing in all the edge rushers. It's the middle of the field, and you saw that towards the end of the game last week. That's where the interception was at. It was in the middle of the field. So, but you saw that towards the end of the game where they were picking up on that and they were adjusting to it and making plays there. So that's where I would be concerned at if I was the Lions.
I think Jared Goff's more comfortable though in that pressure situation than Jordan Love. He's seen more.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I don't
Jared
think
Goff has been to a Super Bowl. He was a starting quarterback in a Super Bowl.
I don't think those throws that you saw from
Jordan Love
are like what you're going to see from Jared Goff in this game. And look, Goff's he's shown to be very accurate, especially this season. Now he almost threw Josh Reynolds on that, overthrew Josh Reynolds on that first touchdown. But for the most part this season, the Lions have worked the middle of the field well.
Yeah.
If you watch a good amount of their plays and how they operate, they find ways to get the ball to their receivers in the middle of the field more than I see them get the ball on the outside.
Yeah,
I would be concerned if I'm the Lions. I'm just saying 7 doesn't seem high to me.
I think 7.
Seven's a big number in.
It is a big number. It's definitely a big number, but it doesn't seem high.
I think this number should be like 3.5, 4. I think it should be about where the Ravens number is. I think. I mean, I would not be surprised, and this isn't just me. Like we're trying to reverse jinx the Lions. Like I wouldn't be surprised if either of these teams won this game. I think the 49ers are better, although without Debo, I'm less certain of that. But the Lions are a really good team. Like they had a really good season. This isn't like a 9-8 Green Bay team or a 9-8 Tampa Bay team. If either of them had advanced to this point, where you're like, they kind of got hot, but they had never. Like, this is a good Lions team.
Well, any one of them could win the Super Bowl. Any one of these 4 teams is capable, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if one of these. One of the 4 teams is going to win, but it wouldn't surprise me if out of any of them, whatever.
I'd be surprised if the Lions beat the AFC team.
I would be surprised if a team not named. I almost.
What?
I'd be surprised. I'm going to say it. Why not? I'd be surprised if a team not named the Ravens win the Super Bowl.
Really? I do think the Ravens are the best team.
The Ravens are the best team right now. And they are playing like the best team right now. I almost said the Ravens and the 49ers, but I'm not going to be that guy and just take both 1 seeds. I think to make this a little more controversial, I'm going to leave it at the Ravens. And I think this game's too close. The Ravens should be a heavier favorite than 3.5, in my opinion. They're the better team.
I do think they're the better overall team. I just have such a hard time like
betting against Mahomes.
Mahomes just
like,
doesn't.
It's kind of like saying betting against Brady.
Yes.
You just don't do that.
Yeah, because no matter what,
betting against LeBron, you just don't do that.
It's like no matter what the talent differences were, there's a part of you that's like, it's not big enough. The gap is not big enough.
This year, I think it is.
And
normally it's not.
Well,
this year, you look at what the Chiefs have done throughout the season, and you're like, yeah, they're not built, even off the back of Mahomes, to get past the Ravens at this stage.
Yeah, I just wonder because their defense is dramatically better than it has been in most of these Mahomes
but their offense
years.
is not.
The offense is worse. If they can get any of the wide receivers to hold on to the football, that's a big step in the right direction, which the last couple weeks they have been better. I do think the Ravens are the best team left, even as a 49ers fan. I think the 49ers are close, but you really can't shake the head-to-head matchup that you saw with the Ravens and 49ers. Even if I think some of it was a little fluky, I think the Ravens were better. But I don't know that, like, if the Lions were to win, I wouldn't pick them over either AFC team. I think the Mahomes factor
You'd root for them, though.
Yeah,
like,
probably.
They're a team to root for. They're becoming America's team.
Yeah.
We want to.
So you guys are saying the AFC is going to tie it up this year. It's going to be 30. I think it's going to be whatever. I mean, they're going to, because I think the NFC has one more Super Bowl win. So you're saying the AFC is going to tie it up.
I think it would be cool to see a rematch of, gosh, was it 2013? Was that the blackout game?
2012 season, but it was in 2013.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
the Ravens
Niners. I think it'd be
Niners.
really cool at this point to see a Ravens Niners Super Bowl. I think those are the two best teams in football.
They certainly are.
But if you get the Ravens Niners, I don't know if Brock Purdy has enough or has shown me enough to lead a team to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's a prove it game, right? It was last week. That last drive was a prove it drive for Brock Purdy. It's something he hadn't done before, and he was able to pull it off, right? That's obviously there's a big gap between a game-winning drive in a divisional round versus leading your team to a Super Bowl. But because of where Brock Purdy's at in his career, a lot of these moments are prove-it moments for Brock Purdy. Now, to be fair, it's a prove-it moment from Lamar Jackson as well. He hasn't won at this level. He's won MVPs, right? But the big knock on him had been early playoff exits. He's in a conference championship game. I think we both think he'll end up in the Super Bowl. But all of this, like, this is a prove-it moment for his legacy. But he's actually got more on the line right now because he has more of a legacy than Brock Purdy does right now. If Brock Purdy either loses or makes it to loses in the conference championship or makes it to the Super Bowl and loses, he's at this point in his career kind of where Jared Goff was with the Rams, where it's like, oh, that was a nice season and they had a lot of nice pieces around him and they're well coached. But we're not looking at necessarily Jared Goff as an MVP candidate or, a great quarterback in this league. Lamar Jackson's established himself as a great player in this league. He kind of needs a Super Bowl. That's why he got the contract.
It took a while. It's why he got the contract.
It's why he has an MVP. It's why he very well might get a second MVP this year. But he's
you can be a great player, win a bunch of MVPs, and still not win the Super Bowl. Just saying.
Yeah, but look at the guys that have won Super Bowls. The list of those guys versus the guys that have just made Super Bowls, really hard to differentiate. Like, there's only a handful of guys that have won Super Bowls that aren't all-time dudes.
I'll say this too. Brock Purdy has an advantage in that category. He could fizzle out after this season, and no one would bat an eye.
Yeah, because
of the prospect that he was.
Yeah, well, and he's had a very short run. I mean, he hasn't even started 2 full seasons, so you're still kind of looking at it as like, maybe he is a Jared Goff more than he is, maybe a Joe Montana or whatever. Coming up next, we've got some Northern college football we're going to talk about here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi, Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me as well. A reminder, hands on the wheel, eyes and focus straight ahead. As the driver, you've got one job, and that is to drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline, Doug Lesmerises. He covers Northern college football on Kings of the North, a show that focuses on college football in our kind of neck of the woods. Doug, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
We appreciate it, Doug. I got to say, first and foremost, I love kind of what you're doing with the Kings of the North, kind of to counteract all the Southern football shows and podcasts and everything that focus on the SEC. I guess what made you kind of take the leap into like, hey, the Big Ten and Northern college football country deserves the same kind of attention that the SEC gets?
Yeah, you nailed it, right? Like, I think the South has brainwashed college football on a national scale. And our point is not, I mean, of course the South is good.
Yeah.
But the North is good too. And also beyond that, like, we have fans that care. We have a college football culture. And I wanted to like contextualize that. Like, what is success in the North? Because sometimes up here, man, like, we do it a different way, right? And it's one of those things, like you said, the North and the South are different in college football. And I think everybody knows what you mean. You guys know what I mean, right? Like, they get after it maybe in a different way. So we can still win and succeed. And if you don't beat Georgia, it doesn't mean that you stink, right? But then, by the way, as soon as we created this show, we get a national championship game between Michigan and Washington that showcases how good Northern college football is. And I feel like the North is rising up, right? When you see what Michigan did, when you see Oregon and Washington, when you see what Nebraska and Wisconsin and Syracuse and programs like that are doing, like, the North is rising to the moment. And in the 12-team playoff, the North will be absolutely competitive with the South and the number of teams in and the number of national championships. And the sport is changing, and it's not going to be as Southern dominated as it has been for the last 25 years.
Doug, speaking of teams that are rising up, that seems to be what Ohio State is doing, at least in the offseason here, because, you know, trying to make sense of that quarterback room has been, my task on a Monday. Because, you watch what they did after the Cotton Bowl, and you saw the two options that Ohio State threw out there and was like, maybe it's not as big of a sample size as I'd like to see, but it still doesn't feel like these are the two guys that can get us back above Michigan or, on top of the college football world. So they go out and get Will Howard, which makes a lot of sense because, making a splash in the transfer portal is huge. But then they add a guy in like Julian Sayin. And, if you're anything like us in Nebraska, we want to start a 5-star quarterback. So make sense of that quarterback room and talk about how Ohio State is trying to become the leader again.
Yeah, so the standard had been set. They had 3 straight first-round quarterbacks since Ryan Day got here, right? Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, C.J. Stroud. So that's the new level, and the quarterback this past season didn't play at that level. Kyle McCord wasn't bad, but he wasn't first-round quarterback good. And Ohio State still played Michigan down to the final minute of that game before a final pick ended it for him. So they had to elevate. And Devin Brown, who started against Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, had been a borderline 5-star guy. He had been in the quarterback battle, but there was like, are you sure that's the guy? Lincoln Keenholt, who came in for him, the true freshman from South Dakota. That was just a tough spot to ask him to do that. But you kind of thought they needed a transfer as a 1-year patch. So like Will Howard wasn't a shock. But Julian Sayin, I think, is a shock, right? So Bama explodes, and this is one of the pieces that is available because they have Air Noland, who is like the number 5 or 6 quarterback in this 2024 class, who already committed to them. Now they had Julian Sayin, who was number 1. Of course, we all remember when Dylan Raiola once upon a time was committed to Ohio State. So, like, they've been involved with everybody. But the idea of now having Sayin and Noland sort of ready to battle it out for the next guy, it's definitely Will Howard in 2024. There is zero doubt about that. But 2025 and beyond, they're set up for that too, and it's going to be a great battle.
We're talking with Doug Lesmerises. He has the Kings of the North show that covers Northern college football. Doug, I'm curious about the Ohio State offensive coordinator hire in Bill O'Brien. How was that? I know you covered Ohio State for a long time. Obviously, you still keep an eye on them as a team kind of, above that midway line in the country here. How do you think that is as a hire for Ohio State at that offensive coordinator spot? I know Alabama fans were a little mixed on him a couple of years ago, but you can't really deny he's one of the better offensive minds that was probably available, right?
Yeah, and it's a different hire than what he was at Bama or in New England, right? Because he's coaching under the 2 greatest coaches in our era and maybe ever, in Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, but they're defensive coaches. So he's kind of running his offense. He is coming to Ohio State to run Ryan Day's offense. So their scheme, their ideas, how they go about it's not going to change. You just are lifting the burden off of Ryan Day, so he doesn't have to be the guy leading every offensive meeting. So he doesn't have to be the coach with his head buried in a play sheet on the sideline. And that's the most important thing, because Ryan Day almost gave it up last year, but it would have been to Brian Hartline, their great receivers coach, who was elevated to offensive coordinator. He's never called plays before, ever.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan Day couldn't quite do it. So Ryan Day kept the play calling in 23, but he had to find somebody who's done it, who he can trust to hand that off. So this is not a situation of like, hey, Bill Bryan, come save our offense. They're going to run the same stuff. It's a situation of, can Ryan Day now do all the other things the head coach has to do and trust that he has a guy who's going to run the offense the way it wants to be run? And from that standpoint, you get a guy who's been at Bama, who's been at New England, who's been an NFL head coach, who's been a Big Ten head coach. I think it's a great hire for Ohio State.
Now, Doug, I want to look at the whole landscape of college football here for a moment, because I was watching back an episode on your show yesterday, and you handed out your top 4 way too early seeds for the college football playoff. And 1 and 4 really intrigued me. 1, because this is a Big Ten team, and they're a new team in the Big Ten, an expansion team, you could say, in Oregon. You said they will be the 1 seed next year. And then on top of that, you went on to say your 4 seed was NC State out of the ACC, which was, it kind of provided a lot of shock factor for me. But then, once you kind of think about the state the ACC is in, maybe it's not that big of a shock. Why did you land on those 2 teams?
Yeah, so Oregon, I do think coming into the Big Ten, the one school that will consistently recruit on Ohio State's level in the new Big Ten is Oregon. I think Dan Lanning staying at Oregon is a big deal. Getting Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma to continue that experienced quarterback thing. You don't have to take a step back there. Yes, they're going to lose some skill guys, but they are recruiting at a different level than almost everybody in the North outside of Ohio State. So I think they can continue that. Whereas there's going to be a lot of teams. There's a lot of quarterback turnover, right? What's Washington going to do without Michael Penix? What's Michigan going to do without J.J. McCarthy? Things like that happening throughout the sport. So I just think Oregon is positioned to be an every year big-time contender in the Big Ten. And I do think Oregon and Ohio State will be the 2 best teams in the Big Ten next year. They could wind up playing 3 times because they play in Oregon, and then they could meet the Big Ten championship game, and who knows, maybe they meet in a playoff game as well. And then NC State, I'm looking for where is there a veteran quarterback who can go somewhere and elevate a program, again, like we've seen recently. Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina is going to go be the quarterback at NC State. I do think the ACC is wide open. And the main thing, I just encourage everybody to make your 12-team bracket right now. Make one every month. Let your thinking evolve, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun. We have to embrace this. I think it's great for college football. But one of the weird things you realize is the top 4 seeds have to be conference champs. And when the ACC right now is one of those conferences, you're like, what? Like the second best team in the Big Ten, the second best team in the SEC is probably going to be so much better than the ACC champ, but these are the rules. So I almost put Syracuse in the playoff, guys. Like, come on. Like, I was like, hey, let's rep the North. Who's the best team in the ACC? Florida State's losing everybody. Do you believe in Clemson anymore? It's hard to find an ACC team to believe in. So I thought they're well coached and they've got a veteran quarterback coming in.
Doug, you mentioned Washington early on there in that answer, as they have a lot of transition. Obviously, you're losing Michael Penix. Maybe more importantly, you're losing Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb and obviously that great coaching staff there. What do you think about the hiring of Jed Fish at Washington? Good move by Washington. Could they have maybe done a little better, or how do you think they project now without Kalen DeBoer at the helm?
Yeah, I do think I like Jed Fish at Washington more than I like Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, and that is not a shot at Kalen DeBoer. We did our Kings of the North Coach of the Year. Of course, it was Kalen DeBoer. He did a great job at Washington. I don't know that it's a cultural fit. I don't know that it's a stylistic fit at Alabama. I have real questions. It's different. North and South are different, man. And like Saban went down there and did that, but he didn't go straight to Bama from Michigan State. He went to LSU and he went to the Dolphins and he established some stuff. I just wonder about DeBoer at Alabama. Whereas Jed Fish, I think, is going to come up there. And it sounds like he had a great team meeting yesterday and got everybody fired up. I think they're going to throw the ball around. Yeah, they're going to have a little bit of a dip. Listen, they were so experienced.
Mm-hmm.
31 of their top 35 guys this season for Washington were 4th, 5th, or 6th-year players. That was a rare opportunity to be as experienced as they were. So that's a tough spot. And so Washington's going to step back a little bit, but I like the Jetfish hire.
That's Doug Lesmerises from Kings of the North. Go check that out on YouTube. That's Kings of the North College Football on YouTube. Doug, hopefully we will catch up again soon. We appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, thanks, Doug.
That's Doug Lesmerises on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline. Coming up next, hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and for this hour number 3, KFOR in Lincoln. We should be streaming on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, but we're having our daily internet outage at 9 a.m. here, so we'll
checking the cord right now.
We'll be back hopefully shortly. Although I still think you can hear the audio on those channels, you just can't see our
plug it back in,
our bright and shining faces. Yeah, I think it's. I don't think it's the Wi-Fi. I think it's the internet this time. Not that I'm a technician at all here. Just that's my guess.
She's slow moving, but we are coming back.
So we are happy to have you here with us. Also want to remind you about the Warhorse Sportsbook, the Warhorse Festival of Games. We have just about a week left here for you to get qualified and get entries into the $100,000 prop card challenge and the $20,000 grand prize drawing. How you get entries into that? Super simple. First and foremost, make sure you're a Warhorse Rewards member. That's the most important thing. Secondly, every time you go place a $50 sportsbook ticket, you get entered into, or you get an entry to enter into both the $100,000 prop card challenge and the $20,000 cash prize or free slot play drawing. Once you have those entries, make sure you go and validate with your rewards member card at the casino in Lincoln, because that is how you win. You won't be eligible unless you validate your entries. Now, after February 1st, that's your last day to get these entries in. You're going to have a little bit of a wait there until after the conference championships are over, and then you'll be able to do the prop card challenge. You go 25 for 25, you've got your shot at $100,000. Andrew and I are also going to do a card before the Super Bowl. You're doing 2 cards?
2 cards.
Okay. We're also going to do a little competition with each other.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to join in as well, join the competition, maybe we can figure out a little show prize.
Show punishment. We still were in the process of trying to come up with a punishment.
Yeah, but maybe we can do a little show prize. If you beat us, if you beat Andrew and I, maybe we could figure out a little, maybe get you out to the new Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill in Gretna. We'll figure something out.
What is my punishment? Walking to work?
Yes, you have to walk.
Because it is only like a 7-minute drive, but walking.
Oh, it's a long walk.
That would be hard.
Yeah, especially at that time in the morning.
I'd probably have to leave at 5:30.
Yeah, at least to make sure you got here on time.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll figure something out. But the Warhorse Festival of Games, make sure you do not miss out. If you have any questions, need a little reminder on the things that I just told you, go to warhorsecasino.com for more information. They've got you covered there. Remember, you have to go to the casino in Lincoln to get qualified for the Festival of Games. Speaking of games,
I'll take it.
Nebraska and Creighton both play tonight. We're at a big crucial time of year for both teams. Nebraska kind of fighting for their NCAA tournament life on a game in, game out basis. That's kind of just where they're at right now. Creighton, as we talked to Joe Lunardi earlier,
a little more locked up.
As far as, obviously if they lost out or something, they would not make it. But as far as how things have been going, their spot is pretty safe. Trying to work on seeding. As he said, they go on a little 4-game winning streak. Maybe they bump up to that 3 line. They keep going.
I'm looking at their schedule. Their next 7
are winnable.
Yeah. They play Xavier twice. They play Butler twice. And in that same mix, it's DePaul, Providence, and Georgetown.
Which, speaking of DePaul, just fired their head coach yesterday.
Yeah, that was probably needed.
It probably was. I was a little surprised because typically They're a little more patient with their mediocrity than they were with Tony Stubblefield, although
he started off too strong for them.
Yeah, he started off having a decent year, his first year, and then they just kept kind of sliding.
And this season has been bad.
Yeah, I was going to say 3-15, calling that mediocrity is generous. So, Creighton, they played DePaul on Saturday, the 27th. That's the pink out game with the benefits for the I believe it's the Hope Lodge here in Omaha for families that come to Omaha for their cancer treatment. But the next handful of games at Providence is probably the hardest game. That's a challenging game, although Providence has not looked like the same team since they lost Bryce Hopkins. But going to the Dunkin' Donuts Center in Providence is always a super challenging place for Creighton to play. But you look at Xavier, DePaul, Butler, at Providence, at Xavier, Georgetown, at Butler. Those are the next, as you said, 7 games. They've got an opportunity, even you go 6-1 in that stretch, you feel pretty good. All of a sudden, you're 20-6 on the season and heading into the last handful of games. Now, the last 5 games are a gauntlet. They go UConn at home, at St. John's, Seton Hall at home, Marquette at home, then at Villanova. Those last 5 games are going to determine whether they're a 5 seed or a 3 seed, probably. But they've got opportunities in front of them to go out and make it happen. Nebraska, on the other hand, their season, again, with their game tonight, they go out and face Ohio State at home. That's a game that, listen, Ohio State is gettable. They're not a bad team, but they're gettable. At Maryland is gettable. Wisconsin at home is going to be really challenging. Wisconsin's a good basketball team. You go at Illinois, you have to assume that's a loss. That's a really good Illinois team, especially with Shannon back. Then you go at Northwestern. We already know about Nebraska's issues on the road. We saw how close that game was at home. So Nebraska's they're going to have to really hold serve here at home as if they're not able to start getting some of these road wins. Luckily, they do have opportunities at home. We mentioned Ohio State. I don't think they're going to get Wisconsin at home, although they could. I mean, they've got Purdue at home. They could obviously get Wisconsin at home. But then you've got Michigan, Penn State, Minnesota, and Rutgers all at home. That's 5 more. If you win those 5 games, you can lose Wisconsin at home and lose all of your road games. You're sitting at 19 wins.
Yeah, roughly.
That's probably, I mean, they're 14-5 right now. I rolled off 5 home games right there. 19 wins probably gets you in. You'd feel better if you had 20, but 19 wins probably gets you in with the strength of the Big Ten Conference. If you could either steal, listen, if you get the Wisconsin win, because that's a quality win, you're in. Or if you steal a road game, you're in. I feel good about that. But really, we're only asking them to win 1 game, either on the road or against Wisconsin at home, that they shouldn't necessarily win or haven't showed that they're likely to win so far this year.
They have to win on the road.
They
really just have to win on the road.
Because at Indiana's gettable.
You can't expect them to win 5 games at home.
Maybe.
Yes, they've been fantastic at home.
Yeah.
And their record shows that, wow, Andrew, you're probably crazy for saying something like that. But they have to win on the road because it's more than just getting in. You're not playing at home when you're in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
You have to start winning on the road, and that starts now. You have to beat the good teams on the road. You have to beat the bad teams on the road. You just have to win on the road. And if this Nebraska team wants to be taken seriously down the stretch of this season, they have to start by doing it against Maryland. I'm not going to say they have to beat Illinois. Illinois is a very good basketball team, but you have to beat Maryland. You have to beat Northwestern. You have to beat Michigan at the end of the season. These are teams that you have to win against. If you lose to Indiana, you can chalk it up as, okay, yes, they split. If you lose to, Ohio State, okay, yes, they split. But Michigan's not what they were. Northwestern is, based on what I saw on Saturday, you can get them on the road too.
Should be able to.
You can get them there. And Maryland is nothing to brag about. Those are the 3 games that I need to see you win in order to make a serious case for you to be that team Joe Lunardi said you should be once you get to the NCAA tournament. You're that team that, you're not knocking on the door to be 1 or 2 in your conference standings, but you're that team that scares everybody else. Because this Nebraska team is scary. They're built to be scary. They have some really good pieces on this team. They know what they want to do every time they're out there. You just have to execute. You have to execute on the road.
Yeah, I mean, you do. That's for sure. And what concerns me, though, is, you make fair points. Michigan shouldn't be scary on the road. At Ohio State, maybe that's one that you split. At Illinois, probably not winning that one. But like at Maryland, at Indiana, those are teams that are gettable and that Nebraska should be able to win. But you would say the same thing about Minnesota. You would say the same thing about Rutgers. Those are games where Nebraska gets a double-digit lead, blows it on the road. Until I see them do that, I'm way more likely to count on home games, because the only game they've lost at home so far this year is Creighton. Now, I'd put Creighton and Wisconsin in the same neighborhood, so I'll call that a loss at home for them as well. But outside of that, I really don't think it's crazy for them to win their other 5 home games that they have left. Now, you're right. If they can get at least one road game, A, they have to prove a little something to themselves that they can actually win conference road games. But B, that takes your resume from, hey, we are probably in with 19 wins, to you feel really good about yourself with 20 wins and a top 100 road victory as well. For what it's worth, Ken Pom has them winning 6 more games throughout the season. They do have a road win in there. Actually, at Indiana is where Ken Pom has that as the most likely place to get a win, which that would be interesting, because I think they're probably, honestly, I think it's more likely that they get Maryland or Michigan. But a lot of these games are kind of coin flips too. They're, in that 45 to 55% one way or another in terms of Nebraska's win percentage. So Nebraska's got some work to do, especially if they want to, because listen, let's say they win the 5 games at home that I talked about. They don't win anything else. They end up with a 19-12 record, right? I think that puts you pretty squarely in one of these play-in games, as what was usually an 11 seed in the play-in games outside of the 16s. Like, that puts you in that. Right now, Joe Lunardi's got Wake Forest, Cincinnati, South Carolina, Kansas State in those 11 seed play-in games. That's the place Nebraska wants to avoid. They want to avoid being in that spot. And right now, they are the last team to get a bye out of those play-in games, according to Joe Lunardi. So they're right on that bubble. They need to do something that they haven't done yet this year in order to push them over the edge, whether that's another quality win at a place at a team like Wisconsin at home, or finally winning a conference road game. That, I think, would help Nebraska's resume tremendously and keep them out of that play-in Tuesday, Wednesday game, right? For Creighton on the other side of it, they've got an opportunity here with the next stretch that we talked about, because Xavier's not that good this year. They're struggling, as we mentioned. Going 6-1 in these next 7 games on the table for them, and then they're in a good position to finish out the season. So that's kind of what we're looking at, though. Both those teams play tonight. Creighton plays at 7:30 here in Omaha, if you want to head out to that one. Nebraska, they're playing at 6 p.m. in Lincoln. If you want to get out to some Big Ten basketball as well, I'll have the dual TV setup going, so I can catch them both. But wanted to switch gears a little bit here from college basketball. Oh, actually, I wanted to ask you a question.
Oh, hit me.
I forgot about my question. This came to me on Twitter, and I'll give credit here after I ask it to you, because I have to look up who said it to me. But I was asked on Twitter if I could trade one player from Nebraska to Creighton or Creighton to Nebraska.
Okay.
Which player from the other team do I think would be most helpful to their rivals' season? So I want to do this.
If I trade somebody,
so I'm going to do this 2 ways. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first way, I just want you to pick a player from the other team that would make the first team better.
Okay.
Right. So I want you to pick a Nebraska player that makes Creighton better and a Creighton player that makes Nebraska better.
Okay.
And then I want to try and put together a real trade where we actually have to exchange players.
That is a great question.
Because that the second part of that question
is
was
really
hard,
really difficult.
because I think the first answer is very easy.
Okay.
Nebraska needs Trey Alexander.
Sure.
They need a player like him that can just do everything.
Yeah.
He can handle the ball,
create shots.
He can score the ball,
Yeah.
he can create for himself. They need Trey Alexander. That is just, I think that's the layup in this conversation. As for what Creighton needs, it gets a little more interesting because when you take somebody off of a team that's not as good as the other one, unless they are scoring 28 points a game and they are lighting the world on fire, but they just can't get it done like Boo Booey, right? Like if they're Boo Booey on Northwestern, that's easy to say, hey, let's get Creighton to get Boo Booey. So, even if he doesn't fit right away, we can find a spot for him.
Figure it out.
But this Creighton team is all about fit. So that's another interesting piece to this whole thing. For me, I think if I'm Creighton, I want Rink Mast. And I know Rink plays the center position, but I think I move him to the 4 spot. Or maybe I move Kalkbrenner to the 4 spot because he can hit from the perimeter if I need him to.
I think you run into trouble guarding on the perimeter if you've got both of the guys on the floor at the same time. That's where I would work. Because offensively, I think
But I like how Rink closes out defensively.
Yeah, there's a difference between like having him close out and having him guard primarily on the perimeter. Because even Kalkbrenner can move with the guy on a switch. I don't want him.
He makes up more for his length than he does with his.
I don't want him out there all game.
His lateral moves,
and I don't want Mast out there all game either.
Okay, but all right. Here's what I'm thinking. Rink Mast is a better. He's a bigger body, so that makes him harder to score on versus Kalk is, and I know he's defensive player of the year, but he uses his length so much that like when he played against Joel Soriano, like Soriano's so big that he could just bully Kalkbrenner down low just based off his sheer size. Now Kalkbrenner would get a block, but if Kalkbrenner's getting a block, the ball still would end up in Soriano's hands. He can end up scoring. I liked Rink more for the strength piece of it. But you're right. It is difficult to have them both on the floor at the same time. I think in terms of guard play or forward play,
I think there's a clear answer for who Creighton could use off Nebraska's team. And
go ahead.
For me, because it addresses the biggest weakness of this Creighton team, and that is wing athleticism. And I think you take Bryce Williams. I think he in Creighton's system is a really nice piece. Kind of fits that. What Arthur Kaluma brought to the table, but he doesn't necessarily require as much of the ball in his hands as Arthur Kaluma did. And he brings a nice little bit of scoring punch to that spot. I think if you're Creighton, and I don't know if he would come off the bench or if he kind of play that Mason Miller role, you move Shireman to the 4 and play a little bit smaller with Kalkbrenner at the 5 still. Bryce Williams, to me, shooting about 37% from 3 this year, about 13 points a game, but at 6'7" and as a wing, he provides something that Creighton really has some issues with this year, and that is a little bit of athleticism on the wing and perimeter spots. That, to me, I think helps them the most. For Nebraska, if it's not Trey Alexander, because that's what you said, and you're probably right on Trey Alexander to Nebraska, I wonder what a Baylor Shireman looks like with Nebraska's offense, because he can do
2 lefty sharpshooters.
Yeah, you got some lefty sharpshooters out there. He can kind of run a lot, kind of almost a Sam Grizzell point guard type situation with Baylor. Baylor played point guard at South Dakota State before coming to Nebraska. Since Nebraska doesn't really have a true point guard right now, not that Baylor is a true point guard, but he provides some more ball handling, playmaking, shot making that I think Nebraska could really use. And I think he would be really, really good at Nebraska. And I think Bryce Williams would be really good at Creighton. I think those roles would fit both of them as well.
Yeah, going back to that Bryce Williams to Creighton, it's hard because I don't think Creighton needs that either. I know that he brings some good speed on the outside, but
I think against teams like your UConns of the world, where they're a little bit longer and more athletic and they can overwhelm. Like there's most teams that Creighton plays, they're okay in that spot. But if they want to take the jump from where they are, like we talked to Joe Lunardi, where they're in that second tier and take that jump and try and match up with the UConns, I do think they need a little more length and athleticism on the perimeter.
Maybe, but they didn't lose that game because just of that. It was.
I mean, they lost the game for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, they lost that game primarily though because of their effort rebounding. They kept giving UConn they gave UConn way too many chances. And if you look back at the second chance points, I bet that's the difference in the score.
It was part of the second chance points for sure. They got killed on offensive rebounds. I think they gave up 25. But again, a 6'7" guy in there, he averages about 5.5 rebounds per game, would be helpful in that as well. But also, they only scored 48 points in that game. Creighton's not winning any games where they score 48 points, pretty much ever.
Yeah,
and they got suffocated defensively.
So it's interesting because I thought of Rink as a player that could be in the starting five. Maybe Rink's more of a player that, takes the spot of Fred King.
Yeah, you bring him off the bench and you don't have to play.
I like the idea of Rink Mass more than I like the idea of Fred King.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Fred, he's ahead of Fred King now for sure.
And even if you had to slot him into the starting lineup, Creighton could find a way to work it out. It may not look like Creighton basketball anymore, but they could find a way to work it out. It is difficult though, because I still don't know if there is an answer for Nebraska to Creighton. That's more of the tougher conversation, because it's not just you can just implant a better player onto this Nebraska team.
Yeah.
And you just know what their need is.
Creighton's pieces overall are better than Nebraska's pieces, even though Nebraska gels pretty well together. So it's easier to just take one
very well coached
and upgrade the spot there. So if we got a couple of minutes here, if we wanted to make a real trade, and so here's how I'm going to do it.
I've struggled so hard just to put one player on Creighton's team. You think I can make a trade here?
Well, listen, we're going to try, because it'd be really easy just to be like, yes, I'm going to trade Bryce Williams for, let's say, Jason Green, and straight up, right? So we're going to try and make it a little realistic here, right? So either a starter for a starter, rotation guy for a rotation guy, reserve for a reserve. Like we're going to try and
I think you could craft up something interesting.
So I'm looking here. Let's try your Rink Mass trade first, okay?
Okay.
So
we would give up Fred King, and
so you'd have to give up to give up a starter though too. So that's where
you have to give up a starter.
Well, yeah, because Rink Mass is a starter, so you have to give up a starter to get him. So if you're sending Fred King over there, you get a starter and a reserve from Nebraska to even it out. So we need a starter from Creighton.
Would you trade Ashworth?
If I get so I have to get a for
like, would that be a trade that appeals to Nebraska? Because you have to think about both sides here, because you're not
Ashworth is probably a better point guard than they have,
but you're not going to give up one of your top three for
Fred King. Well, so let's say
no, you're not going to give. Yeah,
for
trade up for Fred King, and
so
then
let's
the other
say
way
it's
around.
Ashworth and King for Mast, and who's the other player for Nebraska?
Ashworth and King, why not just for Mast? I mean, maybe you could go to the bench and just say,
well, because then Creighton doesn't have a point guard, so you need you need to throw a point guard in there.
Well, I mean, why can't Josiah Doetzler elevate sooner rather than later?
Ooh, I don't feel good about that. Not yet. I mean, he's honestly.
You take Sam Hoiberg?
I kind of think I might. I think I would take.
I don't think they're getting him up, giving him up.
I think Hoiberg and Mast for Ashworth.
What about Rice
and
Eli Rice?
More of a wing shooting guard than a point guard.
Okay, all right, give me Sam Hoiberg.
Sam Hoiberg and Rink Mast for Fred King.
They're not taking that
and
trade.
Stephen Ashworth.
They're not taking that trade at all.
Yeah, I don't think they're taking that trade either.
Let's come back with it in Hurrdat Hot Seat.
Yeah, we'll come back more with Hurrdat Hot Seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me as well. And I want to tell you about our friends at Pratt Dental. They are located in North Platte, Nebraska, and they were the first dentists in Nebraska to be certified in the BioClear method and modern smile design, which can correct many aesthetic dilemmas in a permanent and less invasive manner than traditional treatments such as crowns. Because it is less invasive. That means you've got less time, less waiting, fewer appointments, because you can do multiple restorations in the same day. Go check out Pratt Dental at prattdental.com/bioclear-dental-treatment. That's prattdental.com. You can just click on services and the BioClear treatment will be right there. Or you can give them a call, Pratt Dental, at 308-221-2800. Pratt Dental, creating healthy smiles.
Real fast, I think I have a good middle ground for us.
Okay.
Because you said you were looking for a little bit extra speed on the outside.
Yeah, a little athleticism and length on the outside.
If you're Creighton, I wanted somebody that's a little bit stronger down low, maybe a more go get the board type of player, but also brings some good size. We kind of forgot about Juwan Gary because of his injury with Nebraska.
Yeah, the injury is where I would be concerned, but he could do a little bit of both there.
Right.
Yeah.
And TK actually threw that my way, and he even mentioned that he may be a better fit than Mast, and that may be who I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody that shows that you have the strength of Mast, the closeout ability of Mast, the stay at home, the rebounding, things of that nature. You're looking for somebody with the speed on the outside, somebody that can really push the ball up the floor, because Creighton likes to work in transition. Maybe we just meet in the middle and find Juwan Gary.
Juwan Gary's a good piece for sure. The thing that shied me away from him a little bit was the injury, because we don't really know how long that's going to take to recover. And then I leaned Bryce Williams, although Juwan Gary is probably more of the mentality you want if you're Creighton. I leaned Bryce Williams because he's a little bit better shooter than Juwan Gary. I believe he's at like 37% versus 33% for Juwan Gary. So that's why I kind of leaned there. His volume's better on three as well, so he spaces the floor a little bit better. But I could live with the Juwan Gary if he's healthy for Creighton. I think he'd be helpful. I think he'd be helpful for him. Now the question would be, who do you trade if you're Creighton for
Juwan Gary
to Nebraska to make the Juwan Gary trade work? Because I think Nebraska values Juwan Gary very highly as well. That's where it gets a little. I mean, that's where this whole exercise gets a little tricky.
That's where this is where the water gets choppy.
So the
actual trade aspect
got a little choppy.
It's easy to know who you want.
Yes, it's easy to be like, yes, we should trade for LeBron James. But making that trade gets a little bit tricky. Kind of looking at, and you mentioned this during the break, is it's difficult for this exercise because the three best players for Creighton are better than anybody else in this discussion. And then the next three best players, so players 4 through 6, are all in Nebraska.
And better than the 4-5 on Creighton.
Yeah, they're better than the 4 through 6 on Creighton. So it's really hard to mix and match to get a trade. Because I don't think like Mason Miller or Stephen Ashworth straight up for Juwan Gary or Bryce Williams is something Nebraska would be interested in. And I don't know that giving up anybody better than that is something that Creighton would be interested in. So,
and you wouldn't go, hey, let me give you that Baylor Shireman and Mason Miller for two of like the
no, because Baylor's too good.
The top tier Nebraska players. Now that would make the most sense if you said, hey, give me Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary for Shireman and Miller.
But I think Baylor's too crucial to what Creighton does that throws things off too much, even if the talent's closer.
And is Baylor looked at as the third best out of those three? Because you could probably say that Trey and Kalk and Baylor are interchangeable at 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, it's kind of like 1A, 1B, 1C. Like there's not a ton of difference there between those three guys. Baylor's been a little more consistent this year than Trey has, but obviously Trey is still playing at a really high level also, although not shooting it quite as well this year. So I think Juwan Gary might be the right answer in terms of who Creighton would want from Nebraska. I don't think we have an answer on a trade.
Well, you know what? It's a fun hypothetical, and if you didn't like it, you can go kick rocks.
Want to thank Maurice Allen. He is the one that hit me up on Twitter with that question. So appreciate you listening to the show, Maurice, and giving us a prompt there. Get our old noodles working a little bit.
My gears are moving. I had a long weekend. I'm back with some good fun hypotheticals.
You got to kind of wash out some of that fog there from the Vegas weekend.
Yeah, you know what? Like I told people yesterday, I'm happy to be back.
As long listen,
4 days
is a long time in Vegas.
Well, it was technically 3 full days.
Okay.
Yeah, which is still a long time in Vegas. Normally they're like, hey, take a weekend.
Yeah, 2 days. Like that.
Yeah, I did the extra day, but fortunately we played golf one day, so it wasn't like
it wasn't like a Vegas day.
It wasn't like, hey, you're gambling and clubbing the whole time.
Yeah.
Which I didn't even go clubbing.
It's
just not my cup of tea.
What's the name of the course you went on?
Angel Park Golf Club.
And what kind of course was it?
A golf
An
course.
18-hole course.
Well, I didn't know if it was a links or I'm just trying to.
Oh, I don't. Are there differences?
Yeah, there's differences.
Dude, you got me. Like I didn't even know that. Like, I guess I'm not knowledgeable enough in.
And that's why I was just wondering
catalog.
I know there are different kinds. I couldn't tell you the different kinds or what the differences are.
It's a golf club. But it's open to the public. Like that's all that I need to know. There's a driving range, there's a putting green, and there's 18 holes for me to play.
Was it just beautiful out there?
Oh, dude, it was incredible. And we had a view of the mountains everywhere we went. You know what? I got a picture.
That
here.
sounds just awesome.
I'm going to show you a picture.
TK on the YouTube stream says, we're talking about injuries and hypothetical illegal trades. Yeah, TK, we are. I want to be as realistic as possible about my nonsense scenarios. Okay.
So like those mountains were in the background everywhere we went.
Yeah. Show them on the stream here.
I guess I can.
So we got a camera. Don't forget about it.
Well, I got to go back to my camera now.
That's selfish.
Right. Yeah. And I'm rocking the Nebraska hat too.
Yeah. You got to rock the Nebraska
So
hat.
there's the crew. This is Andrew Siriati, my brother-in-law. My dad's in the middle. And then my soon-to-be brother-in-law is on the far side.
There you go. All right. It's time for the Hurrdat Hot Seat.
Well, and before I say that Shane's right here, TK, who says quickly humbled AR. I don't know if Shane's just twisting my arm or if he's actually speaking facts.
There are different kinds of courses. Like there are links courses, which is a different style of golf course than certain other ones. I don't know what the differences are or what they mean.
A links is the oldest style of golf course, first developed in Scotland. Leave it to Shane to know his history. That a boy. I don't know history though. So this actually,
I knew links was Scottish. So there's apparently golf.com says there's 6 different kinds of golf courses. Interesting.
That's totally on me.
That is totally on you, Doc. So you've got links course.
Okay.
That's number 1.
Is it explained or no?
Yeah. They're long explanations, but we'll try and circle back here.
Okay.
So you got links course. You have Parkland course. Often features lots of trees and lush grass.
Built inland away from the ocean.
Links course is
that's also known as just a golf course.
So that's Omaha. That's just any golf course in the Midwest here. So a links course features rising ground or ridge and refers to sandy area along the coast. So it's like a coastal golf course. So we're at 2
so
here.
All of these are under the umbrella of golf course.
Yes. You have a Heathland golf course, not Heartland, Heathland, an area of open, uncultivated land, especially in Britain. So lots of
okay.
Vegetation.
I'm learning.
And coarse grasses. Sandbelt golf course.
What is that? Just on the ocean? Like you're on the beaches of Hawaii?
The Sandbelt region in Australia is where it comes from. It is
the soil is surprisingly sandy. Oh, you wouldn't say.
with the Sandbelt. Interesting.
Maybe.
Stadium or championship golf
which is
course.
the only courses I play.
So basically these are just like I think where like Indian Creek, I think would probably qualify as this as a stadium or championship. They're designed to have tournaments on them. They're less kind of for general public recreation. So the more you know.
You learn something new every day.
We learned something there today. Thank you, Shane, for
nice job, smart guy.
Yes, Travis. St. Andrews is a links course. That's correct.
No, St. Andrew is a saint.
Oh. But the place is a links course.
Oh.
Probably named after the saint.
Who knows?
We didn't get to any Hurrdat Hot Seat questions.
No, because my brain's in a different world still.
We will get to the Hurrdat Hot Seat questions coming up next, probably here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. Probably we'll talk less about golf courses in the next segment, but I can't make any promises.
You know what? Maybe I just thought of a question. That's golf
about
related.
we might. We'll see. Coming up next on Hurrdat Hot Seat. Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. I'm Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me as well. And I want to tell you about our friends at the Team Jack Foundation. They are working tirelessly to fundraise and fund projects to ultimately eliminate and cure childhood brain cancer. Finding better treatments is part of the path, but one day they hope to find a cure. They've raised over $12 million to date in funding. They currently are funding over 13 projects with the most renowned hospitals around the country, and they are doing everything they can because currently the treatments used are decades old and highly toxic. And even if a child survives the brain tumor, they're often left with lifelong issues because of how harmful the treatments are, not just obviously to the cancer, but to the child as well. They also have a long-standing relationship with the University of Nebraska Medical Center and the creation of the Nebraska Childhood Brain Tumor Program. If you want to learn more or to get involved, go to teamjackfoundation.org to find upcoming events, to be able to get involved, to learn more about Team Jack and everything they're doing for such a worthy cause. That's teamjackfoundation.org. All right, hopping back into Hurrdat Hot Seat. So, okay.
For the first time.
Yeah, for the hopping back in, but we didn't really get started before. It's okay. We are looking at, so who was you brought up backyard baseball.
So I was going to ask you, who is the GOAT all-time sports video game character? And I GOAT all-time, that's redundant. Who is the GOAT sports video game
the
character?
GOAT at?
And I was going to say you can't say Pablo Sanchez because that's everybody's like quote unquote
in backyard baseball.
And just in backyard sports in general, but in specific backyard baseball, I mean, he could just rake. He was this little small Hispanic boy, and he was fast. Mm-hmm. He had good playmaking ability in the field, and he could just, like I said, hit the stew out of the baseball. So I was like, man, who is the GOAT that isn't Pablo Sanchez? But you said you weren't a big franchise fan of that because that wasn't in your window of opportunity growing up.
It was a little bit after when I would have been kind of the age for it. I was much more, so I was like on the back end of NBA Jam, which was a very big deal for me. I used to play at my cousin's house all the time.
Is that the 2-on-2 game? Yep. Oh, that was so fun.
It was so much fun. Like, so my one of my earliest memories with my cousin is me and my brother would go to my cousin's house. Shout out Danny and Neil. And we would play NBA Jam on his like Super Nintendo or whatever it was at the time. And I loved that game. I was obsessed with that game. And then NFL Blitz in terms of like non-realistic.
NFL Blitz was so fun. And it was even better for me because growing up in St. Louis, the Rams were really, really good on that game.
Yes.
You had Warner, you had Falk, you had Bruce, you had Holt.
I used to play with the Rams all the time because you had so many weapons and
their defense was good.
Yes, it was incredible.
So anyway, we were on this backyard front and I was going to ask you a generic character who's the GOAT, but then it fell into, man, I'm just going to start naming,
like trying to identify the roster.
Player,
yeah.
And I'm going to read you off some of these. Okay, so we were looking at one of the screens, and the one player that you still haven't guessed yet played for the Devil Rays.
Is it Aubrey Huff?
It is not.
Okay.
He had a Devil Rays uniform on.
But it doesn't look like him at all.
No, and, he's not really known as a Devil Ray.
It's not. Man, that's too late for Wade Boggs, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, because I think he retired in like 98.
But it fit the timeline this dude was on the team.
Pitcher or
he's a position
player. Okay. Oh, this is tricky.
But like when the game was made, I'm sure it was made in 2000 and not 2001.
Yeah. this isn't like, I mean, this doesn't look anything like, it's not like Fred McGriff, is it?
No, no, it is not Fred McGriff, but it is another home run hitter.
Okay. Is it Greg Vaughn?
No.
Okay.
Are you on the 2001
yeah,
roster?
I am looking at the
Go to the 2000 roster.
The 2000 roster? Okay, maybe that's throwing me off here.
And like I said, he's not known for being a devil ray.
He's, almost no one was back then. There was not a...
Dontrell Willis was awesome, though, in 05 to play with in backyard baseball. That dude was so great.
I forgot about... Oh, is it Jose Canseco?
It is Jose Canseco. I'm looking at this guy in this game, and I'm thinking there's no way that is who, like, you drew up a pale man with black spiky hair and called him Jose Canseco.
I don't know about that. I will say this does bring up the question of, and this was before my time, but like the greatest, pretty much the consensus greatest video game athlete of all time is Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl. It was basically like impossible to
stop unless you ran out of gas.
Yeah. There's also, so there was, like old school sports video games were kind of hilarious. I used to have this game called Double Dribble for the original Nintendo.
Okay.
And Michael Jordan very famously had signed a deal with a video game company that like kept his rights from being used anywhere else. So on most video games for most of Michael Jordan's career until it recently expired, now you see like retro versions of him in like the NBA 2K and stuff, is most versions are like a Joe Smith number 24 on the Bulls, but it's Michael Jordan like attributes.
Right.
So he's a 6'6" guard and whatever. And so there was this nameless Chicago Bulls player in double dribble basketball that was crazy good. Like he was basically Bo Jackson level of good,
but for his sport,
but for double dribble basketball. Like I would take like half court shots and just drain them. And especially all those games had like kind of like an on fire mode. So you could like dunk from like half court and stuff like that, almost like NBA Jam. And so that's a dominant player. You got to go, if you want more realistic, I think it was 04 Madden. Michael Vick was unbeatable because of how fast he was in that game. They had to like tone him down a little bit in subsequent years because you could just literally roll out with him and either
run the distance,
take off or throw a 60-yard bomb and be good every time. So like 04 Michael Vick is like goated.
What a quarterback's passing yard should look like for his rushing yards.
Yeah, like he's like goated in video game lore, but those were the ones that like stuck out to me the most.
Yeah, for backyard baseball or backyard sports purposes, Pete Wheeler was always fun to play with because he was this dorky looking, maybe not dorky because Dmitry Petrovich was more dorky. He had like the pocket protector and like the pens in his pocket. Pete Wheeler was more maybe ditzy.
Okay.
But he was fast. He had so much speed. So he was great on the outside. But Dmitry Petrovich, for a nerd, was like the all-star in football. Like it was kind of like polar opposites of what you would think about. Hey, this guy excels for like the math team. Like he's definitely a mathlete, but he's also like the athlete of the school.
He's your Andrew Luck.
Yeah, but he kind of didn't like maybe like have good luck with the ladies out at the bar scene, but Dmitry Petrovich was a stud. And then I think it was Kenny Amaguchi or something like that. He was a boy in a wheelchair in the game. And he was like a really good pitcher.
Really?
Yeah. So I remember those type of guys. But Pablo was
the
insane. GOAT. The more I think about it, I'm like, man, I'm shocked that nobody in this world, and I'm happy that no one has, or at least I haven't seen it, have gone back and be like, is this game politically correct? Like, hey, this game. I was like, guys, this game was made in like the 2000s, and I and a bunch of other people had fun playing with it. So
every time you say Pablo Sanchez, I think Pablo Sandoval, and I get mad.
Let me show you what Pablo Sanchez looks like.
Of how bad he was with the Red Sox. Like, it just makes me so irrational.
Like look at his attributes on his player card: batting 4, running 4, pitching 3, fielding 4, and it's out of 4. Like, and look at him! Look how small he is. He's showing his little belly. Pablo was so good in that game.
Well, much like Pablo Sandoval showing his belly, although not as good at baseball as Pablo Sanchez was. Man, I still get mad about Pablo Sandoval and Carl Crawford might be my 2 least favorite Red Sox signings of all time.
Was Pablo Sandoval a part of that no-hitter for Matt Cain or perfect game for Matt Cain? Did he make the final throw to first base?
Probably. He was much better with the Giants than he was with the Red Sox. His most famous moment with the Red Sox was probably him swinging and his belt popping open. Like he
was a big boy.
He was not in ideal shape for a professional athlete, and he didn't hit at all for the Red Sox, and it made me really mad. Still mad at Pablo Sandoval because they paid him a lot of money. But it happens.
It does happen.
We got through like half of a Hurrdat hot seat question.
Yeah, and it really wasn't even a question.
It was
kind of a prompt.
It was more just a prompt. That's all right. That means we've got more to get to on Thursday when I'll be back. I'm out tomorrow. It'll be Andrew Rogers and Anna Bellinghausen to take you through your Wednesday. I will be back on Thursday. This has been Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln.